The void of space was vast and merciless. Stars shimmered like cold embers scattered across the infinite black, beautiful yet utterly indifferent to the tragedies unfolding among them. Princess Thasi sat alone in the pilot's chair of a battered royal escape craft, its once polished ivory panels now scorched and smeared with ash. Warning lights pulsed like a heartbeat across the console. Every flicker, every metallic groan of the hull reminded her that her world, her family, her empire was burning behind her. Her hands trembled on the controls, slender fingers wrapped in torn gloves. Strands of silver hair clung to her damp skin, plastered against her cheeks by sweat. Her lavender complexion, once a mark of nobility, looked ghostly under the dim emergency lights. Her deep blue officer's tunic was burned at the edges, the once proud sigil of House Thasi smudged by soot. She had been raised in marble halls where servants bowed and courtiers whispered. Now she sat surrounded by sparking wires and dying engines, a fugitive princess adrift in the cosmos. But worse than the ruin of her palace was the memory of his face, Veric, her brother. The last time she had seen him, his golden eyes had been alight not with warmth but with ambition. His voice had thundered through the throne room as soldiers spilled blood across the polished floor. "You were never fit to rule, sister. Thasi must have a strong hand. My hand." He had smiled as fire consumed their homeworld. The sting of betrayal pressed against her ribs harder than any wound. He had been her protector once, her partner in childhood adventures. Together, they had run through the star gardens of the palace, hiding in the shade of crystalline trees. He had sworn to keep her safe. And then he had taken everything. Kara blinked back tears, refocusing on the stars ahead. There was no time for grief. Her ship was dying, and Earth, the pale blue world on the horizon, was her only chance. She had visited it once as an envoy, years ago. A primitive planet compared to Thasi, yes, but full of life, stubborn and resilient. She had admired its people for their fire. Now it would be her sanctuary. The craft shuddered violently as it entered Earth's upper atmosphere. Hull plating screeched, metal glowing white-hot as the ship tore through layers of oxygen and nitrogen. The controls bucked in her hands. Sparks showered from the ceiling. Kara gritted her teeth, holding on with every ounce of strength left in her weary body. The desert stretched beneath her, endless dunes glowing gold beneath the sun. With a final agonized roar, the escape craft crashed into the sand, plowing a trench that vomited fire and debris across the barren landscape. The cockpit exploded with dust and smoke. And then, silence. Marcus Reed had lived in silence for years. The Earth had celebrated him once. Astronaut, pioneer, hero of the Orbital Dawn mission. He had touched the stars, tasted the edge of infinity. His face had filled newspapers. His voice had been carried across classrooms to inspire children who dreamed of space. But fame was a fragile thing. His mission had ended in disaster. A shuttle torn apart, crewmates lost to fire, a return to Earth in disgrace. They had called him reckless, cursed him for choices made in split-second chaos. He had walked away alive, and for that, many could not forgive him. So Marcus had walked away from the world instead. He had built a small home in the desert, far from cities, far from voices. Days passed in the sound of wind against stone, nights in the vast quiet under starlight. The desert gave him no answers, but at least it asked no questions. That morning, he had been fixing the solar rig behind his house when the sky burned. A streak of fire tore across the heavens, screaming as it carved into the horizon. He had seen falling stars before, but this was different. Too controlled, too mechanical. The ground shook as something struck the dunes miles away. His instincts stirred, the instincts of a man who had once guided machines through the void. Without hesitation, he mounted his dune rover and rode into the storm. What he found was not what he expected. The wreck of a ship, if one could call it that, lay half buried in sand, smoke rising from its carcass, panels twisted, wires sparked, and crawling from the shattered cockpit was a figure unlike any human he had ever seen. She collapsed onto the sand, coughing, her silver hair catching the light like molten steel. Her skin glowed faintly lavender under the harsh sun. Marcus froze. His heart thudded. This wasn't possible. The woman raised her head, violet eyes dazed with with pain and whispered words in a tongue he didn't know. Then, in broken English, she breathed, "Help me!" He carried her back to his home, though every rational voice screamed at him to leave her. Yet something in her eyes, exhausted but unyielding, compelled him. For days she drifted in and out of consciousness on his bed. He cleaned her wounds, repaired what little of her suit he could salvage. At night, she thrashed in fevered dreams, crying out names he didn't recognize, except one, Veric. When at last she woke, her first words were not gratitude. "You should not have saved me." Marcus raised a brow. Strange way to thank a man. Her gaze was sharp despite her weakness. "By helping me, you've already made yourself a target. They will come. They will burn your world as they burned mine." "Who?" She hesitated. Then she told him. Slowly, haltingly, she unraveled the story of Thasi, the betrayal, the coup, the brother who now hunted her. Marcus listened, skeptical at first, but the conviction in her voice was undeniable. She wasn't lying. She couldn't be. When she spoke of Veric's soldiers, her voice trembled. "They will not stop. On Thasi, there is a tradition. To bind loyalty, a ruler may claim a protector through oath and chain, to stand as shield, willingly or unwillingly." She lowered her eyes. "I would not force this on you. But if I bind you, they may hesitate to harm you. You will be marked as mine." Marcus let out a dry laugh. "So what? You're asking me to be your slave?" Her silence was answer enough. But then she whispered, so softly he almost missed it. "Not slave. Guardian. Chosen. It is not love. It is survival." He looked at her then, not as an alien, not as a princess, but as someone broken, desperate, clinging to any hope left. And against all logic, he nodded. "Fine," he said, "but only because I'm too stubborn to die quietly." The nights that followed were restless. Kara showed him fragments of her culture, sigils drawn on sand, gestures that carried weight in her people's rituals. With a blade salvaged from her ship, she etched a symbol into his wrist, a mark of fealty, glowing faintly as the alien alloy bonded to his skin. When Veric's soldiers came, they came like wolves, black ships descending over the dunes, weapons gleaming under starlight. Marcus and Kara fled through the desert, pursued by mercenaries bred for war. Gunfire tore through the sand. Explosions lit the horizon. Marcus, who had sworn he'd never fly again, found himself back at the controls of her half-broken craft, weaving it through canyons, with Kara firing at their pursuers. Through it all, their bond grew, not of romance, not yet, but of survival. Each night they expected to die, yet each morning they woke, still fighting. Kara sent secret transmissions to loyalists scattered across the stars, begging them to rise against her brother. She feared it was hopeless. Marcus told her otherwise. "You're still alive," he said. "As long as you're alive, so is your fight." In the final confrontation, when Veric himself descended to Earth to crush her, Marcus stood at Kara's side. Blaster fire rained around them. Sand burned to glass. Brother faced sister, one drunk on power, the other clinging to hope. Their duel was fierce, brutal, echoing across the desert like thunder. When Veric fell, it was not Kara's blade that ended him. It was Marcus's defiance, his refusal to yield to fear. They struck the final blow. When the dust settled, Kara stood crowned not in ceremony, but in survival. Her people would rise again, but the cost would haunt her forever. Marcus returned to the desert, the mark on his wrist a reminder of bonds that ran deeper than blood. They had been strangers from different worlds, yet in the crucible of fire and betrayal, they had found something unshakable. Not slave and master, not even ruler and guardian, but survivors. And in the silence of the desert night, as stars watched from their cold thrones, that was enough.